Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to cross the Øresund once again to Copenhagen in Denmark, and we're going to revisit one of the famous Danish gypsy breweries, and you've seen me review a good number of their beers before, but we're going to continue on with a kind of three-part series that I started for you a few videos back. So for this one we're going to have a look at the next in the Examine the Bitterness series that they've just released, and this particular beer is the Zero IBU, which is a triple IPA coming in at 12.1% ABV. Now the last one I reviewed for you was the 3000 IBU, and as I mentioned in that video they have done a new version of the 1000 IBU as well, which I'll also need to try, because the original 1000 IBU was one of my favourite beers that Mikkeller ever did, so I'm curious to see how they've kind of tinkered with it and maybe made it better actually. So definitely an interesting review that, so we'll save the one that I think is going to be most interesting until last actually. But it's a really interesting series that's supposed to make you think about how bitterness affects the beers. The odd thing about these though is that it's only 100 IBUs that you can detect with your palate. Beyond that it's just kind of saturation, so the 1000 and the 3000 IBU beers, in some ways they're almost a little bit pointless, and it's theoretical IBUs. So what they're doing is they're adding lots of bittering hops in the early stages of the boil, if you like, because the earlier in the boil that you add the hops, the more IBUs and bitterness that you get out of them, and then once you get to around the hour mark on the boil, that's when the hops that you add the bitterness level kind of starts to drop off then, and you get more sort of flavour and aroma profile from them. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we actually taste the beer, but a little bit of homebrewing knowledge for you at the moment. So yeah, 3 beers in this series: Zero IBU, which is this one, the yellow one, the 1000 IBU, which is the limey green coloured can, and then you've got the 3000 IBU, which is the slightly darker green coloured can. So yeah, looking forward to this one, and as always I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Mikkeller before. No doubt there will be some more in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Danish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Mikkeller then, on to my brewery notes quickly. So Mikkeller, as I've told you before, are one of the famous Danish gypsy breweries, and this one was founded by Christian Keller and Mikkel Bjergso just over 10 years ago actually, although it's now run exclusively by Bjergso, who used to be a physics and maths teacher. Christian Keller left the company quite early on to go and work at Soundhouse magazine in Copenhagen, the main reason being that he wanted to have a core range of beers, whereas Mikkel wanted to go down the experimentation route, which is what's made this company so famous of course. But again, these guys are very influenced by the American craft beer movement, and the whole thing basically started out as the homebrewing experimentation of Christian and Mikkel and just grew from there. But for a long time these guys didn't have their own brewery. They brewed at a variety of host breweries in America, in Norway, Scotland and Belgium. Most of their beer is actually brewed at the Proefbrouwerij in Lochristenhoeve in Ghent in Belgium. Most of the stuff you'll find over here in Europe actually is brewed there, but their home base for a long time was the Mikkeller bar on Victoriagade in Copenhagen, and quite soon after that they opened up a second bar along with Toul, whose founders are former students of Mikkel's, and they do some very good beers as well. But in April of 2016 they took over AleSmith's former brewery in San Diego after they'd moved on to a larger space, and the following year in 2017 they announced that they were going to establish a second brewery at City Field, which is the home of the New York Mets over on the east coast of the States, and that brewery, from what I understand, is up and running now, and we are starting to get a few of the Mikkeller New York cans over here as well, which is quite interesting. It's kind of cool that they've basically got 2 different breweries that are brewing lots of stuff, and they are still brewing some beers down in Ghent in Belgium as well, Lochristenhoeve, the Proefbrouwerij as I mentioned earlier. But they've also got various locations around Copenhagen these days. One of the most interesting ones is Baghaven, which is where they're experimenting with sour beers. They've got 12 oak fodders there that range from 3,000 to 7,000 litres. They've got 50 different 225 litre Chardonnay barrels from California in there as well to age their beers. The beers that they're brewing there that they're making there are brewed at Warpigs. They put them in a tank basically, then take them up to Baghaven to be blended and aged and stuff like that. I have done a little out and about video at Baghaven, and that's somewhere that I really do recommend that you check out if you get the chance. It's a really kind of interesting place to go. That it's a little bit out of the way. You've got Brodin and Build has just opened up close by as well, and there's some really good food in that region of the city as well, but somewhere that I would recommend that you go and check out as well. They've got their collaboration brewery with Three Floyds as well. That's called War Pigs, and that does some awesome pork stuff. By the way, I really recommend that you check that out. They also have the Ramen Tobiru restaurants as well, which there's a few exclusive beers brewed for as well, and that's some of the most authentic ramen noodles that you'll find outside of Japan actually. I think the chefs in both of those restaurants that they have in Copenhagen are in fact Japanese, so you are getting the kind of real deal when you go there. But yeah, they've got quite a few different locations around there as well. There's a few Mikkeller bars. There's the Ullum Brood, which is on Victoria Gade as well. They've got the two, I think there's two Mikkeller and Friends now if I remember correctly. But yeah, lots of different things going on around Copenhagen involving these guys. They've got various bars abroad as well. There's one in Barcelona, one in Berlin, Warsaw, Bucharest, Stockholm, Reykjavik, Tórshavn in the Faroe Islands, Tokyo, Seoul, Taipei, and also Singapore. As I mentioned, various locations in Copenhagen, a good few around San Diego, and a good number in Bangkok in Thailand as well. So yeah, a really interesting company, this one. They've brewed well over 1,000 different types of beer. It may even be like 1,500 or something like this when you add all of the you know, the San Diego and the New York things into the equation as well. But an iconic Danish craft brewery, these guys, and if you haven't tried some of their beers, I highly recommend that you do. It's very good when you get even the more experimental ones like this actually. So yeah, let's just have a little look at it. Let's leave it at that for the history section of the video. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website in the description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. I believe there's separate pages for each of the different breweries as well that you can check out, and if you want to learn about all the different beers that they've done, again, check out the website, but you can have a look at the Rate Beer and Untappd pages for them as well. So yeah, that's all you need to know. Let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer then. So I have to admit, I mentioned this in the 3000 IBU review as well. One of the things I thought was kind of interesting when I got these cans, and I didn't notice it until I'd brought them home, was that they kind of, the tongue that they have here, it's kind of similar to the idea that I have a little bit with my beer reviews. I always talk about it on different parts of the tongue, although I would say that you know, the sweetness at the front, I would always find that this is where the fruits come out, and on the sides of the palate I think that's usually where the kind of hoppy flavours of the beer, and then the middle of the palate for me tends to be the more kind of sweet malty side of thing actually. So it's interesting to see it put in a slightly different way. I'm guessing this might be based on cicerones or something. I am, of course, I'm not a trained cicerone or a beer cicerone or anything like this. I just kind of do it for fun. But yeah, this one is a big half-litre can, and I think this beer cost me like 50 Swedish crowns, something like that, maybe 60. So yeah, about £5 British, what, €6, €6.50, something like that for this one. So for what you're getting, actually pretty decent value, I have to say. That's one of the good things about Systembolaget, of course. But yeah, let's get this guy out then, and we'll get on with the tasting. So as I was mentioning to you earlier, the thing when it comes to IBUs and bitterness in beers, when you add the hops into the beer, it's all about you know, it's all about at what point in the brew that you actually add these. If you add the hops straight away, earlier on in the brew, when you get it up to boiling point, that's when you're going to get most of the IBUs out of the beer. That's what you term bittering hop, if you like. That's when they tend to use like Columbus, for example, and stick that in and give you the nice big sort of spicy floral aromatic notes. The later that you add hops in the brew, usually around the hour mark, from then on until the 90-minute mark, which is the kind of standard boil time, if you like, the bitterness that you're going to get out of these hops drops off to virtually nil over the course of that half hour, and you start to get more flavour and aroma profile out of it. The other thing is that if you have a long boil, your beer does tend to be darker in colour as well, because the sugars tend to caramelise a little bit more. So judging by the colour of this one, I wouldn't. The 3000 IBU was quite light in colour. I actually think this one might be a little bit darker in terms of its colour, and that could be down to the different types of malts in here. I would be surprised if this beer isn't a little bit more kind of New England in style compared to the other one. And it does say on the back as well that it's got oat flakes in it, and I don't think... We can have a little look at the 3000 IBU can. No, the 3000 IBU can did have oat flakes in it as well, and I think I made that comparison too to the original 1000 IBU. The original version that was the 9.6% one, that was more of a kind of West Coast IPA actually, so I think I'll need to have a little look at the I think I definitely need to have a little look at the 1000 IBU, the new 1000 IBU, so you'll see that in a few videos time. So yeah, let's have a little look at this beer then. As I say, the colour of this one, it's kind of a medium orange colour this. It's almost the colour that you would expect of a West Coast IPA, to be honest, but remember the colour, it's not all down to the boil, it is down to the different types of malts that you use in this one, but going by the fact that there's oat flakes in this, that was where that tangent kind of took me. Going by the fact that there is oat flakes in this, I would guess that this is it's going to be a more New England style, but then again I've noticed some of the West Coast elements starting to creep back into these, but as you could see, there's a sort of quarter finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy coloured head on this one. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, and you can see a little bit of activity just under the head where some of those bubbles are starting to head up towards that kind of thin foamy layer. But overall, nothing particularly surprising about this beer when you consider what style it is and what year it is and things. You know, it has got a little bit of haze to it. If I put my fingers behind the glass, you can see, pardon me, there is just a little bit of a hazy quality to this one. So yeah, let's take a look at the aroma and just see how we got on with this then. Yeah, no, so straight away with this beer, you can smell that this is definitely a little bit more kind of malty and things like that. Definitely a little bit of that kind of white bready, wheaty kind of thing in there. I would say it's more of a kind of plain white bread rather than anything else, but you can get the kind of oaty creaminess on top of that, but at the same time you can smell some kind of brown sugary qualities to this beer. There's definitely some caramel and biscuity notes in there, but when it's 12.1%, you know, it is going to have a big kind of boozy element to it. All the boozy flavours tend to come out as a sort of brown sugary kind of thing in these beers actually. But yeah, that comes across really quite nicely, I have to say. The aroma of this, you can tell it's a big boozy beast straight away. You can pick out some grassy and floral notes from the hops. There's maybe a teensy little bit of earthiness in there too, so I'm wondering, I mean, I think the hops, I thought the 3000 IBU was like a Citra Mosaic mix, and I wouldn't be surprised if this one is the same. There might be a little bit of Simcoe or something in it as well, right enough. But you can definitely pick out a bit of a tangerine orange. There's also a teeny little bit of earthiness in this one as well, which is what's making me think there was Mosaic in the first place, that little bit of earthiness that this beer has. Because the Mosaic earthiness is quite distinct. So I would guess that there is a bit of Mosaic in here. Juicy oranges, like I was saying. I want to say there's a little bit of a kind of dark, passion fruity, grapefruity note to this one. So maybe some Simcoe, could even be Galaxy right enough, but it doesn't come across as pungent enough to be Galaxy, I don't think. Galaxy is very, very kind of forthright, if you like, in that sort of passion fruity note, whereas Simcoe's a little bit more reserved and kind of, it's almost like a milky passion fruit actually. But yeah, definitely a little bit of mango or something like that in this one. Some big tangerine oranges and a few other things going on as well. So just keep that in mind with this beer. It's got a nice juicy fruity aroma to it, but at the same time it's got a big sweet kind of malty backbone, so bear that in mind with this. It comes across really quite nicely actually. The aroma of this one is pretty nice, to be honest, so take a bit of time and just enjoy it then. But we're going to have a taste of this one now and just see how we get on. This one is the 0 IBU, a triple IPA coming in at 12.1% from Mikkeller in Copenhagen in Denmark. Let's get stuck into this beer. Sláinte, skål. Oh yeah, that is pretty nice, I have to say actually. It's really interesting because in some ways this beer reminds me of some of the tripels that I've had recently. You know, some of these Belgian tripels, they won't actually add hops to the brew, it's all about the kind of candy sugar in the middle of the palate, but with this one you can definitely taste the fruity side of the hops, which is it's really interesting that this beer isn't a million miles away from like a Belgian tripel, except the thing that breaks it apart, of course, is the fact that the yeasty qualities are a little bit different. This is a really interesting one. This is one you definitely need to try just for the kind of quirkiness factor, if nothing else. yeah, that's a really, really kind of very unusual but very interesting beer. It gets a thumbs up from me, this one. It almost reminds me a little bit of some of these Malztrinken things that you can get in Germany, that is, it basically is just kind of malted grains dissolved in water, basically. It's quite nice. This almost tastes like the little bit of wort that you'll get before you put the hops in, and things like that. So it's interesting. It really is interesting to try this one, actually. A 0 IBU triple IPA. So yeah, this beer, in some ways, it also reminds me a little bit of that brewery from Norway, Untappd. And they're the ones who do oak and thyme, if you translate it into English, but they're the ones that brew their beers with raw wort. They don't boil it, and you can feel a little bit of that in this beer too. So let's try and break the flavour down a little bit. This is definitely a very quirky one. In the middle of your palate, then, you're going to feel that nice kind of bready quality. That blankets the middle of your tongue, and it comes across as being almost like German-like in its smoothness, if that at all makes sense. It definitely has a little bit of that almost Brauhaus smoothness to it, this beer. You can feel, as you move into the middle of the palate, you can definitely feel, pardon me, getting a bit of gas out of it, but you can definitely feel that nice kind of thicker oaty creaminess to this one as well. In the very centre of your palate, there's a good little bit of a kind of brown sugary quality to this one, which is obviously the boozy notes, and as you move further out, you start to get a little bit of a biscuity note in there as well. But the thing you will notice about this, if you have homebrewed, when you taste the malt base on this, there's a little thing that the beer comes in and it's got a bit of bite to it when it comes in, but as you kind of transition into the aftertaste, it really has a flavour that's very akin to if you take a little taste of your wort once you've cooled it down before you put the hops into it, and you know, it's kind of, it really just, it tastes like that. It basically tastes like, pardon me, the kind of sugary water once you've taken the sugars out of your malt, actually. Yeah, it's really interesting that it just has a little bit of an almost raw quality to it in the malt base, which is really interesting. I think this is it's definitely more of a New England thing, and I think it's probably, that flavour is probably down partly to the yeast that they've used, and also the fact that it's got oat and things like that in it as well. It would be, if this was a West Coast IPA, I think it would come across a little bit more differently. I think it's maybe the oats that are giving you that type of that raw kind of vibe to this beer, but it works really quite nicely. As I say, that's one of the real quirks about this beer. So in terms of the hoppiness then on this side, on the hoppy side of the flavour. So as I always say, the hop flavours I find come out on the edge of your tongue. In the back corners of the palate you can get a little bit of earthiness there, and as you come further forward you can detect sort of remnants of the, you can really detect the remnants of some of the like floral aromatic kind of things, and then round the front curve of the palate I'd say there is a little bit of grassiness in there. Now, going by the flavour of the beer, it is, obviously they have calculated it so that it is 0 IBUs. I would wonder if in reality it's very difficult, if you're adding hops into the beer, to get 0 IBUs out of it exactly. I would think that there is a teeny bit of bitterness to this beer, and I think it's only likely to be like 1 or 2 IBUs, something like that. So, you know, we'll let them away with that. But I really think there is a little bit of the green side of the hops coming out on the edge of your tongue. I would suspect that it might just be 1 or 2 IBUs in this beer. I think it's very, very low, but we'll let them away with calling it 0 IBU. And especially when you take the beer in, you do get a little hint of bitterness out of it. Then it just smooths out and you get the more thicker kind of smooth and sweet malty qualities in there. The brown sugar, I think, comes out quite nicely the further you go into the aftertaste as well. You can really feel that nice big oily brown sugary sweetness kind of coming out in the middle of your palate, which is nice. Behind the front curve of the tongue, of course, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters start to push their way out of the beer. And for me, again, this is quite similar in terms of its profile to the 3000 IBU. So yeah, if you go towards the back of that oily bubble, I think there is a wee bit of a kind of passion fruity note to this one. It's definitely got that little bit of a darker passion fruity quality, but as you come further forward, I think it evolves to be a little bit more mango-y. There's almost a little bit of an apricot-y flavour to this one. This beer comes across as almost a little bit medicinal in the way that some of these fruity notes come out. It's almost like a kind of dried fruits, there's almost like a sultana flavour in this one as well. I don't think I said that about the 3000 IBU. But it definitely has a little bit of that kind of almost dried fruit sultana type alcohol note to it. But as you come further forward on the tongue there, I think there's a wee bit of the tangerine orange coming out from what I suspect is Mosaic as well. But I think I've got a feeling it's Citra, Mosaic, and maybe a little bit of Simcoe that's in this one, to be honest with you. Wouldn't be surprised if it is just Citra and Mosaic right enough too, because Citra can give you some of that passion fruity, grapefruity type thing depending on what malts and stuff you're mixing it with. The further you go into the aftertaste as well, you will notice there's a teeny little bit of an almost blueberry flavour, which is one of the complexities that you can get from Mosaic. But there's almost a little touch of like a limey flavour to this one as well, which is kind of interesting. But I would say, yeah, that's quite minimal, but you will find it just behind the very kind of front curve of your tongue. There is almost something that is just very slightly limey in this beer. But I mean, overall, this is a beer that I think is really quite interesting. I have to admit, when it comes, I'm not sure I quite like a beer that has 0 IBUs. I think you have got to have just a little bit in there. You definitely can taste the rawness of this one, and it's one of these beers that you should try just for the kind of novelty of it, if you like, for the kind of quirkiness. They've pulled it off really nicely, I will give them that. But I think, you know, it's one of those things. I kind of got into IPAs through the West Coast IPAs. I like my beers to have a little bit of a bitter kick to them. So with this one, it's nice and it's quirky, but I'm not sure I would drink this again. I would drink, you know, maybe I'd taste it next to the other two in the bar or something like that. But I'm not sure. I think this is a beer that you try once for the kind of novelty rather than anything else. But that said, it is really quite nice. And if you like a tripel, a Belgian tripel, then this one really is going to kind of hit the spot for you. But it doesn't have quite the same yeasty qualities to it. But the way the fruits come out is very similar. And the way the hops kind of behave in the beer as well is kind of interesting as well. So bear that in mind with this beer. In terms of the mouthfeel then, yeah, definitely quite a full-bodied beer. The carbonation is very, very smooth. Carbonation is very smooth. I would say overall this is a big oily mouthfeel that you're getting out of this beer. In terms of the hoppy bitterness, like I said, there is a little remnant of things coming around. I would think that this beer does have a couple of IBUs. I think the most we're talking though is about 5 or something like that. So yeah, bear that in mind with this beer. And the thing I have to admit, I would be interested to know whether the hops that they've added, I would guess they have added some in towards the end of the brew, but I'm guessing it will have been. It doesn't taste like it's been dry hopped. It tastes more oily and things, and usually with the dry hop beers you can taste the sort of dust, the hop dust, and I would expect it would be a little bit more kind of hazy than that if it had been dry hopped, to be honest with you. But I would suspect that this one, the hops have been added later on in the brew, probably over the last half hour, so that would explain why I think you are getting just a few IBUs out of this beer, but I think we're only talking like 2 or 3. Something like that, but there is a little bit of that, the grassiness and the floral notes on the edge of the tongue. There is a teeny bit of bitterness to this beer, but the malt base is quite smooth and also very sweet. It does have that little bit of raw quality that I was talking about as well, and you've got a lovely big oily fruity note to this one. You do get a little bit of alcohol warmth down here, but not quite as much as you were getting with the 3000 IBU. But overall, a really interesting, quite quirky beer, this one. You know, go into one of the bars and have it in a little bit of a taster. I do think that the 500ml can with this one is a little bit much, and in fairness I thought the same about the 3000 IBU, but perhaps the 1000 IBU is perhaps the kind of happy middle ground, if you like. I'm curious as to why they did 3000 IBUs instead of just 2000 as well. I'd be curious to know to know that. But yeah, overall a really interesting beer, this one. Definitely worth trying for the quirkiness factor, and if you like a Belgian tripel, I think this is a beer that is going to tick the boxes for you. So yeah, let's leave it at that then. A really curious, a really interesting beer, this one. one. So give it a go for yourselves and just and see what you think. So yeah, let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Mikkeller as well. I'm sure I'll return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future, and you know, we'll be reviewing the 1000 IBU in the next couple of videos as well. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that new version turns out as well, because like I said, the original 1000 IBU was one of my favourite beers that Mikkeller ever did. So yeah, thank you again for watching. Make sure you check out my social media, and I will catch you guys again soon. Make sure you check out this Examine the Bitterness series from Mikkeller over in Copenhagen in Denmark. Until the next time, Sláinte just now, and I'll catch you guys later. Sláinte, skål, cheers.